So this is something that inevitably comes up on a lot of our calls as people talk about this. It's like such a touchy subject, but suicide. And it's one of those things that, and again, like if you're feeling this or you're depressed, like go out and get help. There's no reason not to do that. You need to be able to do that. And it's super, super important. But it's such a hot topic, that it builds around hysteria. And what I've found from running online groups with men and for years, and we're talking, in fact we're doing that right now, is that this comes up and not everybody thinks it, but it's very common that guys think about suicide at different parts of their lives, and we talk about it a lot on our calls. And one thing that's so amazing about it is when we talk about it, we get to know it and we stop fearing it, and we realize how much of a societal constraint is from it, and it becomes something that we find some peace with, and I personally, there's tons of times where I'll think about it. I don't think that makes you a mentally unwell person. I think if you're obsessing about it, I think if you're isolated, I think if you have the thought you don't have an outlet to go to and talk to people, that does make you mentally unhealthy. And so there's this big stigma around things like suicide, addiction, violence that human beings, men especially, aren't allowed to talk about, because it would make them somehow bad or alienated from our culture. And it's kind of funny because when we do bring it up and when we do talk about it and when we do interact upon it, we realize how common of a thought is. And I guess, and I'll tell you this, that not every person in our groups thinks this by any means. Like some guys are like, no, man, it's never been like a big idea of mine. But the relief that comes from that is huge. Now, when we get into the inability to talk about that, or how society may look at that, or how psychology says that if you are thinking about this, then you're automatically you're in a bad mental state. What does that tell people? What does that tell people to do with their something that they might be confused about, that they're wondering about, any aspect, and I'd even say this, any aspect of curiosity that comes to different thoughts that we have, if we're alienated for those. Think about this, like sex or like wanting to hurt somebody. I remember, this is actually a great story because this is a great guy. I'm friends with him. He house sits for me quite a bit. But when I met him, he was in rehab. And this was 6 years ago. And he said, what do you do when you have rage? What do you do when you have anger? And I remember myself and the other guy that was doing the work at the rehab, we were like, dude, we have rage all the time. What are you talking about? No, but this is a bad thing. This is something that, you don't understand. I want to kill people. I'm like, dude, no, man, same thing. Somebody cuts me off on the road. I want to follow them. I want to make their life feel all the pain that I felt for the last fucking 5 years of my life in that moment. And I want him to see it. And he's like, but you're here to help us. And I'm like, no, man, that's a key part of it. I feel that. Doesn't mean I do it. And, when we do thoughts like that, that's bad. That's not a good thing. You'll go to jail, you'll get in trouble, you'll cause a bunch of harm and pain in somebody. But the personal solution to when you do something that crazy or that, quote unquote bad, is something that has to come from lack of self-judgment within yourself. And so when we shut the door to ideas like, shit that guys go through, anger, violence, the idea of suicide, these ideas of addictions or chasing the highs and all this sort of stuff, and all things that I've dealt with to a great degree and still deal with in my life, we have to open the door to that, because when we shut the door to it, we make it bigger. We make it something that it hasn't become, or that it wouldn't naturally become. Look, if you're somebody that is thinking about suicide and taking that thought, seriously or mildly, the best thing that you can do is talk to somebody about it. But one of the better things that you can do, the best thing you can do is don't do it today. One of the better things that you could do is join a group of men that you could trust, that you could talk about, that aren't going to judge you for it, that allow you to express, that can let you have those moments like my buddy in the rehab, who transformed to like an awesome guy who, if you ask to now, it's like, yeah, sometimes you're going to feel mad. Sometimes you're going to feel anger. Sometimes you're going to feel rage. Sometimes you're going to feel like you quit on everything and you let go. That doesn't make you a weak person. That's part of being a person. That's part of being a man. And you're just going to gain so much from that. Me personally, look, I'm somebody that thinks about violence. I'm somebody that thinks about suicide. I'm somebody that thinks about, God, all like controlling things. I'm somebody that thinks about all sorts of stuff that the world would say is a bad thing, you know. But what makes me become a better person is being able to express those. And you have to learn to speak the truth within you. And when you do that, God, man, it transforms into something that control, confinement, of forcing yourself not to think these things, saying that you're bad and so on, could never do for you. Learn to speak your truth, learn to be a good person. And man, that's what life is all about. And that's what the true message of TSL is really all about.